Welcome to Let's Dig Deeper, a podcast devoted to exploring life through the lens of shadow work. I'm your host, Steph Flores, and together we'll journey beneath the surface into the parts of ourselves we often avoid and the truths that shape how we lead, live, and connect. This is a space for raw reflection, radical honesty, and the kind of conversations that invite transformation. So take a breath, get present, and let's dig deeper. I was talking to one of my friends earlier last week, and one of the questions that came up was, do I need to be healed before I can be happy? And that question can feel innocent on the surface, right? But underneath, I think it carries a quiet weight. It's the kind of question that echoes, right, in therapy rooms or on quiet car rides. And today, we're digging deeper into this idea that happiness is somehow reserved for the healed, that you have to finish processing the trauma or mending the wounds and rewriting all your patterns before you're worthy of joy. We're going to challenge that narrative. We'll explore what healing really is, what happiness really means, and whether or not we've been living under a myth that's keeping us from peace. So settle in. Let's dig deeper. Let's start by addressing the root of this belief. Why do we assume that happiness only comes after healing? I think culturally, we're taught that life is this staircase where you do the work, you climb the steps, and eventually you arrive at peace. But emotional work doesn't always follow that linear logic, right? And our society's narratives don't help because of how we frame growth stories. They're almost always a before and after, right? The broken version of you, then the healed version. That's smiling and glowing. But real healing, it doesn't look like that. And happiness really doesn't wait until the last chapter to show up. When we link healing and happiness too tightly, it creates a conditional relationship, right? I can't be happy until I've healed. And what happens then is that we delay joy. We mistrust our own pleasure. We even start believing that moments of lightness are fake because our pain hasn't gone anywhere yet. And this belief also feeds a kind of emotional perfectionism. We keep editing ourselves until we feel ready to be happy. But healing isn't editing, it's integrating. And integration can happen right alongside joy. We link the two because it makes sense in our minds, but in our hearts, we know better. We've laughed through pain. We've felt peace in the middle of chaos. We've smiled while still aching. And that matters. So what is healing? Let's strip it down from the self-help cliches and Instagram quotes we see all over, right? So healing at its core is awareness. It's learning to name what hurt you. It's learning to feel what you once avoided. It's learning to stop abandoning yourself. Healing isn't the elimination of pain. It's the transformation of your relationship with it. See, there's a moment in healing when you realize the pain might not go away completely. The memory will stay. The scar might never fade. But now you see it differently. You talk to it differently. You respond instead of react. And sometimes healing looks like setting a boundary. Other times it's collapsing in the car after a hard day and finally letting the tears come out, right? Sometimes it's letting yourself receive love without flinching. And other times it's learning how to sit alone without feeling lonely. See, healing is messy and it's deeply personal. And most importantly, you don't heal once. You heal in layers. You heal in spirals. You heal again and again through new people and new choices, new versions of yourself. Which means if you're waiting to be fully healed before letting yourself feel happy, you might be waiting forever. And that's the tragedy of this myth. It makes us believe that joy must come after the work is done. But what if joy is part of the work? So now let's flip the question, right? What is happiness? For so many of us, happiness has become this elusive finish line, something to chase, something to earn. We're sold on a version of happiness that's curated and filtered and constant. But real happiness is quiet sometimes. It's subtle. It's a full body exhale. It's a moment of ease. It's being held by someone who sees you. It's laughing until your stomach hurts. It's waking up and realizing you're okay, even if nothing's perfect. It's important to define happiness on your terms, because if your definition of happiness is something unreachable, like a life with no problems or no triggers and no wounds, you'll always feel behind. And happiness is not the same as high energy. It's not the same as being on, right? It's not forced positivity. Sometimes happiness is feeling neutral for the first time in weeks. And sometimes it's knowing you're not spiraling anymore. And sometimes it's one tiny step forward. And here's the truth. Happiness doesn't require the absence of pain. It requires the presence of permission. You have to allow it. And sometimes, if we're honest with ourselves, that can be the hardest part. So let's call this belief out directly. When I'm fully healed, I'll be happy. When I figure it all out, then I'll rest. When I fix myself, then I'll finally feel okay. This is the healing trap. It's perfectionism dressed up in a wellness outfit, right? There is no fully healed version of you. Not because you're broken, but because you're evolving. See, healing isn't a finish line. It's a lifestyle. And if you keep chasing the end, you'll miss the life happening in between. So postponing your happiness until you've healed is a form of self-abandonment. You don't owe anyone a healed version of you before you let yourself be loved. You don't need to check all the boxes before you enjoy a moment of peace. And your joy isn't something you need to deserve. It's something you're inherently worthy of right now. See, the myth of fully healed is seductive. It keeps us striving, but at what cost? And I think there's a beautiful thing that happens. I think there's something powerful when healing and happiness collide. One of the most powerful things to understand is that healing and happiness can and often do exist together. In fact, sometimes the happiest moments are the most triggering. Maybe you get everything you wanted and suddenly you feel grief for all the years you didn't have it. Maybe you feel loved now and ache for the younger you who didn't. Maybe you laugh harder now than ever before and then cry the next minute because it feels so unfamiliar. And that's okay, because emotions can coexist, and they often do, right? Joy and grief, and peace and fear, hope and uncertainty. You can hold them all. There is no emotional test you need to pass in order to feel happiness. You don't need to be in a constant state of peace to access joy. And you don't need to resolve every wound before you experience freedom. Happiness isn't waiting for you at the end of healing. It's walking with you through it. Here's the part I don't think we talk about enough, is a lot of us, I think, are afraid of joy. And not because we don't want it, but because we don't trust it. Because joy feels unfamiliar. It feels vulnerable, unsafe maybe. Because when you've been hurt, happiness can feel like a setup. It can feel like a trap. It's the calm before the storm. And your nervous system learns to brace for disappointment, even in moments that are good. So we sabotage it, right? We shrink from it. We numb it. But joy is not a betrayal of your past. It's not a rejection of your pain. It's not a dismissal of what you've survived. It's evidence that something inside of you is still alive. And let that part out. Let that part rise. You're allowed to feel joy, not because you've earned it, but because you exist, because your soul deserves relief, because your heart deserves lightness, because happiness is not the reward for healing. It's part of your right to be. Then what if I told you happiness could be healing? That joy isn't just a result of growth, but sometimes it's the catalyst, right? So think about it. Joy regulates your nervous system. It builds resilience. It reminds you there's more than just the pain, that you're more than what you've been through. Laughter, it's medicine. Playfulness, it's liberating. Celebrating, it's resistance, especially for those of us who were taught to survive, not thrive. Sometimes the thing that heals you isn't the processing or the unpacking or the deep diving. Sometimes it's allowing yourself to have fun, to dance, to rest, to love, to flirt, to breathe, right? Healing doesn't always have to be heavy. And sometimes it sounds like your favorite song. Sometimes it looks like your best friend's smile. And sometimes it just feels like joy. So let's rewrite the story. Healing doesn't have to come first. You don't need to wait. You don't need to earn your way into peace. You don't need to punish yourself until you feel ready to feel better. Your pain and your peace can share the same home. Your happiness is not a threat to your healing. It's part of it. You're allowed to feel joy even as you heal. And your happiness isn't a betrayal of your pain. It's safe to feel good, and you don't have to wait. You are worthy of joy now. You are worthy of rest now. You are worthy of peace now. So I want to leave you with this. Healing is not a prereq for happiness. And happiness is not the enemy of healing. You don't need to wait until everything makes sense. You don't need to solve every mystery. You don't need to finish the work to feel the warmth. Joy isn't a luxury. It's not a reward. It's a lifeline. So let yourself laugh today. Let yourself feel light. Let yourself smile without guilt. Because sometimes the thing that heals us most is the very happiness we thought we had to wait for. Let joy find you here. And let that be enough. Until next time, keep digging deeper. Keep choosing you.